Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Esteemed FaceTime with Leaders, an initiative by World Development Corporation. I am Sunny Bancholi, anchor at World Development Corporation. FaceTime with Leaders is a platform for industry titans to share their experiences, thoughts, ideas, and best practices in order to inspire one another and future leaders. In a nutshell, we attempt to encapsulate the multi-decadal learnings acquired by these industry leaders. We also hope that by conducting these FaceTime with Leaders interviews, we can bring together a global community of eminent personalities. By bringing together such visionaries on one platform, we hope to play a part in inspiring the lives of other leaders. Great learnings from great leaders undoubtedly assist everyone by identifying, nurturing, and using the trade secrets that are proven success formulas for many. And this is what we aim for with these sessions, by making them a gathering of industry stalwarts and a knowledge-sharing community. We have one such industry titan on FaceTime with Leaders with us today, Mr. Gaurav Sundaram. He is an accomplished strategic management consultant, CXO, and board director with over 3 decades of professional leadership. He has a proven track record of success in complex business management, global business travel, sustainability, technology, and strategic consulting domains. At present, he is the president of ProKonsul Consulting. In addition, he is a mentor and angel investor at Nojoto and a member of the Business Travel Working Group at the Global Sustainable Tourism Council. Welcome to FaceTime with Leaders, Mr. Sundaram.
Thank you, Sunny. It's a pleasure to be here. I look forward to our conversation.
Right, sir. So could you sum up your career journey for our viewers, please?
I think that's a fairly tall ask because I've been working for a little over 33 years now. But I started my career in 1990 with Thomas Cook, which was my first professional engagement after getting certified with an international body, which was at that time, I was probably one of the first few people to get a global certification in the travel domain. I started with Thomas Cook and as an executive in the travel department, spent about 5 years with them, enormous learning. During the 5 years, I transitioned from travel to setting up a new office for Thomas Cook in the Hotel Imperial office that we had at that time. Ran it for a period of about a year, moved to sales and marketing, where I then worked on customer acquisitions and expanded the scope of our operations into that time Noida and Gurgaon, which were virgin territories. Eventually, I got selected as the youngest manager within Thomas Cook to lead a branch, a full-fledged branch, which Thomas Cook at that time established at Nehru Place, which was the first time that Thomas Cook ventured out of the central Delhi area. This branch was the first ever composite branch of Thomas Cook, which meant that as the profit center head, I was responsible for obviously the profit center, but also the principal travel, retail, and wholesale foreign money operations. So it was a very wide remit. And obviously, as a very young manager, I was probably then about 23, 24 years old. It was a fantastic challenge, an enormous learning opportunity, and my first real exposure to managing people. I had a team of, I think, about 20 odd people at that time, and managing a different business, getting to succeed in building a profitable business in year 1 and year 2. That led to me being promoted to the central branch of Thomas Cook, which was a bigger operation. This period also involved me handling some of the largest global customers that Thomas Cook had at that time. So I was not only managing a business, I was running the profit center, I was responsible for the travel and foreign exchange and other activities of the business, but I was also directly the global point of contact for some of the largest and most profitable businesses that Thomas Cook ran. And it was an intense period of learning. From that time, I moved on with a brief stint with P&O Shipping, which had set up a joint venture in India with Great Eastern Shipping. In a corporate function, I then moved to Cox & Kings, where I headed the business travel operations for Cox Kings in the Northern India region. I think I grew the business by about 300 to 400% during my 3-year stint, expanded the operations of Cox Kings into multiple branches and into multiple business segments, which were related to the core business travel portfolio that we had. In 1999, I shifted out of the industry, the core industry of business travel that I had spent about 8-9 years in, and moved into a pure technology and global distribution company called UTEL International as country director. At UTEL, we managed about 7,000 hotels worldwide and provided them with electronic distribution capability, internet distribution capability, global distribution system distribution capability, and enabling their website. So this was very, very early days of the internet and the global distribution value chain in 1999. And I was running, for a change, I was running initially a cost center because it was a function of the Asia Pacific region. I was running a call center as well. I managed the travel fraternity and generated demand for UTEL hotels. That was my first initial goal. But then subsequently, I was handed the responsibility of managing the largest hotel chain that we had in the Asia region, which was the Taj Group of Hotels. And with the Taj Group of Hotels, I spent over 1.5 years developing their resource base of over 150 revenue managers who I trained in the principles of global distribution, revenue management, and so on and so forth. And my efforts during that time of re-engineering the distribution of the Taj Group resulted in a 500% growth in the revenues that the Taj Hotel generated from the UTEL distribution channel. So that was, I think, a very, very concrete result from my tenure at UTEL. Unfortunately, towards the end of my tenure, 9/11 happened in the US, and that resulted in a meltdown in the travel industry all across the world. UTEL, which had probably 12 offices across Asia Pacific, cut its team down to just about a handful across the whole of Asia. So that was a difficult time. And it resulted in a lot of churn within a span of about 20 days. From 9/11 till 30th of September, I had to wind up the operations and complete the handover of UTEL to the erstwhile management. So, I mean, that was a little bit of a challenging period, but also a learning one. From there, I moved to a company based in Bangalore called Lionel India Limited, which was at that time the joint venture partner of the second largest travel management company in the world called Rosenbluth International. Rosenbluth competed with the likes of American Express and others as the most innovative and aggressive travel management company player. I joined them in the Bangalore office running the Bangalore Profit Center, but I again very quickly took over the management of all global customers that Rosenbluth deployed in the Indian market. So I was the point of contact for all global customers that we had as a strategic account management resource and also as a business development resource for the company. Within a span of about 15 months of my joining, Rosenbluth was sold globally to American Express. So the brand was acquired by American Express and dissolved. And we, as a joint venture partner, now this company was a joint venture between the KK Birla Group and Rosenbluth International, and it was designed to manage the global customers that Rosenbluth had across the world and manage the India operations. So the business was built around servicing the needs of global customers in the Indian marketplace. And this sale of Rosenbluth to American Express did not include joint venture companies like our firm in India, which meant that our entire existence was at stake and we were pretty much wiped out in terms of our business turnover. So from 2003, when I took over as the CEO, my task was to retain the global customers of the erstwhile Rosenbluth organization that we had and extend them for as long as I could. re-engineer the business, hold on to my staff who were obviously being poached by competition with the perspective that the company was going to close down, salaries were not going to be paid, and so on and so forth. So it was a tremendous period of learning, extremely challenging period, and one where I was successful in transitioning the company from where we were almost at a stage where we were going to be wiped out and dissolved to one where we grew the company's overall turnover by over 500% in the next 3 to 4 years that I was the CEO, expanded into new business areas, which were related to the core business. I was also then, I took on an additional role as being as a leader for the erstwhile Rosenbluth partners across the world. So we were about 50 such companies like mine who were either joint ventures or associate partners of Rosenbluth who had lost their global branding. And we created a new global consortium called the Global Experts in Travel. This was a consortium created by former Rosenbluth partners. I got involved with it at a very early stage, and I was involved directly for a period of almost 2.5, 3 years almost in starting to create a new global travel management consortium, banding together these Rosenbluth partners. So during this period, first of all, I got involved with the global business travel world. I started attending many global conferences. I was actively part of creating this global consortium. Eventually, this consortium was formed with about 40 former Rosenbluth partners joining the consortium, and I was elected as Director Asia. Initially, my Asia fraternity of members was just 4, and I grew it to about 15 or 16 by engaging actively with our erstwhile colleagues in the region, building confidence, explaining to them what we were trying to do. We then created a strategic sourcing organization. We created a strategic branding organization. We started engaging with primary players across the world and took this consortium forward. My stint with them as Director Asia was probably about 2.5 years or maybe 3 years. It's a little difficult for me to recollect. And during that time, I also held a board meeting for the Global Experts in Travel Board in Singapore, where we got together all our partners and we created a strategic direction for the organization. I moved from Lionel Rosenbluth in 2007, I guess, and I did my first stint of consulting. I felt that I had spent a fair amount of time in the business. I had done what I had to do. I had achieved all the targets that I had set for myself, and I had also got a fair amount of international exposure and connections. And I established ProKonsul in its first version, which was called ProKonsul Thought Leadership in Bangalore in 2007. It was a 1.5 period consulting stint where I became the India partner of a global network of business travel specialist consultants across the world. I was the first organization of my kind in the South Asia or even the Asia Pacific region. I then created education content for the Global Business Travel Association, which was at that time the largest body for professional education in our industry, and started executing consulting engagements with different companies like Boeing, Airbus, and other organizations who I don't remember now, and got involved with the consulting domain, which is obviously a completely different kettle of fish from being employed and being running a company. So the entrepreneurship journey started in 2007, but I caught the recession at the worst. 2008 recession, I caught it at the worst. And at that time, I coincidentally got an invitation to join Agencia, which was then a part of Expedia Inc. So Agencia, as erstwhile Agencia, was the only B2B product or company within the Expedia group of companies, all other companies being B2C, for example, Expedia.com or hotels.com or whatever else that they had. Agencia was an integrated travel management company, which meant that it was essentially a technology company in the travel domain, which owned its own proprietary technology and delivered this through a full-fledged travel management operation to its customers across the world. It was a very, very different experience because I was working for probably the largest travel company in the world. I was the country director for the India operations. And Agencia's business model was a business model which did not exist in India. So Agencia's solution was that they used technology as the means of delivering the travel experience, which means self-booking technology platform. In 2009, when I joined Agencia, self-booking technology was completely unknown in the Indian context. There were very, very few, if any, players who offered this technology, certainly none at the scale and the complexity of what Agencia did. We also had a completely unique customer service delivery system. We did not deploy our own agents. We had no staff in our office to manage customer service calls. We outsourced this to a BPO, which fielded all our calls for us. Now, in the BPO industry, managing consumer calls is a fairly simple task, but to manage enterprise customer calls required a completely different skill set. Now, I introduced to the Indian marketplace self-booking technology as a standard modus operandi. And it took me 3 years in Agencia to launch my first customer because our product was not right, our strategy was not right. And there was a general perception that being Expedia Inc., which is at that time probably the largest company in the world, Agencia could simply come in and say, hey guys, we are Expedia. We do this in all parts of the world. You must love us, you must pay us what you want, and you must use what we offer to you. And the Indian marketplace does not work like that. The Indian marketplace expects you to develop and deliver solutions which are relevant to this market. And that was my internal challenge for the initial 2.5, 3 years to get my organization to understand that the product needed to be evolved. The product needed to have certain basic capabilities which met the needs of the Indian customer. Certainly, we were not going to change our business model, but it also involved a lot of value selling and conceptualization to make customers understand why they would pay us much more than our competition and how they would save probably 10 times as much because of the technology and the reporting and the capability that we delivered to them. So it was a fantastic learning experience. It was a truly global organization. I enjoyed working with my organization, doing different things across the world. I also, again, got involved with managing global customers. I then grew the business from a zero base in 2011-12 to when I left the business. When I left Agencia, it was over $100 million as book of business signed. During this time, I also acquired the first global customer out of the Asia-Pacific region for Agencia worldwide. Till then, all global customers that Agencia acquired were either originated in North America or Western Europe. And that is why I was awarded the President's Club for 2013. For I would like to name the customer because there might be confidentiality issues, but it was probably about $40 million in size for Agencia. At that time, a very, very big acquisition for Agencia. So I also, at that time, when I was working with Agencia, got involved with the global business travel industry as an advisory board director with the Global Business Travel Association, which was the largest body of business travel professionals worldwide. Initially as advisory board member for India and subsequently as the advisory board member for Asia, I was actively involved with the expansion strategy of GBTA in this part of the world. I helped execute GBTA events in 2012, 13, 14, and 15 in Singapore and India, in China and other markets. And I worked with my colleagues on the GBTA Asia board to deliver this. It was, again, What you will find, therefore, in my career is that normally I've done 2 or 3 jobs at the same time. I've had a full-time responsibility, and I've had additional voluntary engagements, that maybe, or whatever you may want to call it, additional to my core job, whether it was in Lionel, where I was part of the Global Experts in Travel organization, plus my full-time Lionel India role, or an agency where I was country director. I was responsible for breaking open this market, which was a virgin market for Agencia. And that work from 2009 to 2014-15 basically has built Agencia today into regarding India as a core strategic market for them. I also established for Agencia its knowledge processing KPO basically in India, which started with essentially about 4 or 5 employees. And then it grew to, when I left, it was almost 120 employees servicing the requirements of Agencia across the world, whether it was from the technology development standpoint or from the back office processing standpoint. And I believe today in India, Agencia has more than 300 such resources and is a key development center and a processing center for global operations across the world. So Agencia ended in 2014 for me, and then I went back to a consulting role. I felt I had done what I had to do with Agencia during those 5 or 6 years that I was with them. I started ProKonsul, which is in the strategic consulting domain. Also, we have domain expertise in the business travel, in the technology, and now in the sustainability aspects of the business. And during my 8 or 9 year journey now with ProKonsul, first of all, ProKonsul is a unique company in itself. It is probably the only one of its kind across South and most of Southeast Asia. So the closest competitor that I have in my domain is basically in Hong Kong or Singapore or in Australia. This type of consulting, of course, there is core management consulting or strategy consulting or go-to-market and market representation and so on. But the domain expertise that we bring in the domain of technology, in business travel, sustainability, and so on and so forth is probably very uncommon in this part of the world, just because this business is not as well understood. During this period, I also then was taken on as a paid consultant and appointed as the regional director for GBTA in India and Singapore. I represented them for a 3-year period. I got involved with the Business Travel Association as a consultant employee, if you can understand the terminology. I was not a full-time employee. But my role was to really build the GBTA brand as the primary business travel association in the world and open up the Asian region for them and the India region for them. So during this period, I conducted over 20 conferences for them, from as small as maybe 60 or 70 delegates to as big as about 400 delegates. My conferences, which I conducted between 2016 and 2019, were the highest rated conferences within the GBTA world of conferences. They probably do about 200-300 conferences across the world. They had the highest delegate rating, and it was again something very new for me, because I had participated in conferences, I had spoken in conferences, but organizing a conference, organizing speakers, moderators, acquiring delegates, acquiring sponsors, and generating multi-million-dollar sponsorship from a market which historically never ventured into such events was something which was very new, but it was also something that was extremely enriching. And during this time, I also got involved with another Irish company called Taxback International, which is in a very, very specialized domain of global VAT reclaim. Now, it's an industry which is very less understood. It is related to global taxation. It is related to global VAT implementation across the world. And it basically, in a very simple example I was to give you, it basically allows non-resident corporations who send their employees overseas for travel to recover a large part of the GST that they incur in certain countries. Now, that's a very, very sizable saving opportunity. For example, if a Directors Institute was to send employees and spend $1 million in Western Europe, for example, you would have the opportunity to recover about 250,000 euros out of that as your VAT claim recovery. So I introduced the concept in the Asia Pacific region. I conducted over 1,000 presentations, meetings, and such things for them. So that's what I've been doing. And I then recently got involved with sustainability. So I completed a sustainability certification from the Global Sustainable Tourism Council, which is the apex body which builds criteria for sustainability standards across industries, particularly the hotel industry, the tourism industry, and works with governments. And it is actually a body under the aegis of the United Nations. So I'm a part of the business travel working group of the Global Sustainable Tourism Council, where we are building standards for the business travel industry worldwide. And of course, most recently is my completion of the Independent Directors program with Directors Institute. So I guess as I'm graying, I'm also going back to academics to some extent. All of that really depends on interest and passion. If you have passion for your work, if you really have an interest and you feel that what you're doing is contributing to the wider good, not just your own personal good or your own corporate good, but also contributing in some ways to enriching the industry or building a wider consensus. And I think very honestly, all through my career, I have enjoyed working in the international domain. I think I was fortunate that I got a very early start, probably from the time when I was in Thomas Cook and I managed probably at that time, their first global customer across Thomas Cook at that time in 1990s. I was the global account manager for them in this part of the world. I think that stayed with me. And I think it's been something which has been consistent through my career. I've always held more than one role at a given point in time. I have always had multiple priorities that I've had to balance and contend with. And I'm fortunate because I think that exposure, the pressure of that experience, the pressure of delivering success has probably matured me earlier than I probably should have. That's how it is.
Absolutely. Continuing our conversation, we would like to know that you have handled various and intricate roles. So which one of them do you enjoy the most, and which one of them did you find the most challenging one?
Well, I would say that every role which I did, eventually when I look back, I think I learned a great deal and they were very interesting. But to answer your question and not give you a general response, I think very honestly, my first role with Thomas Cook, those 5 years were probably, when I look back on a fairly long career, I think those were the best years of my life. I was absolutely wet behind my ears. I knew nothing. I was technically qualified. I probably held global qualifications, which probably less than 2 or 3 people had in the whole country when I joined Thomas Cook. But I very quickly realized that I knew nothing of the business in reality. I knew theoretical stuff, but I did not know what was happening on the ground. And that's what propelled me to learn very, very quickly and to really keep pace with my colleagues. It was also, it was the time when India was opening up, the initial phases of the opening up of the economy and everything else. It was a fantastic period. I mean, opening up a new branch as a 21, 22-year-old at the Hotel Imperial, managing by yourself, doing, transacting with walk-in customers that we call people who'd come and, very affluent people who'd live at the Hotel Imperial and come down to Thomas Cook to purchase a ticket or to do something. It was fantastic learning. I then got involved, though I was not a salesperson, I got involved in business acquisitions. I acquired almost all customers that we did during that period in the NCR region. And as a result, I was given the opportunity to be interviewed for the new branch that we opened in Nehru Place. Now, because I almost acquired all the customers that the Nehru Place branch had, I was probably the best person for that role. And of course, I did that stint managing the global relationship that we had with the organization called Rotary International, which was the largest, most complex, and most profitable operation that Thomas Cook had. And of course, I got involved with the foreign exchange business as well, which was the bread and butter of Thomas Cook and probably still is. So I got involved with the retail foreign money operations, which is handling foreign exchange transactions at the counter, and wholesale foreign money, where we went to banks, purchased the foreign exchange for them, then collated it, validated it, and then shipped it across to Zurich or other parts of the world as part of our foreign money consolidation. So I think Thomas Cook was really, I would say, the grounding that prepared me for the next 30 odd years that I've been working since then. In terms of my most challenging, I would say two roles which were equally challenging. First was the Lionel India role, which was erstwhile Rosenbluth. I think when Rosenbluth was acquired by American Express and they announced to us that, hey guys, we've been sold, the brand is being dissolved, your business is going to move away from you, and you really have no future because American Express is going to walk into these global accounts that you manage on our behalf, and you're going to have to hand them over. I think that was probably the time which I felt I had my back to the wall to the greatest extent. And as the CEO, at that time, I was also appointed as the CEO of the company. So these things happened almost concurrently. And to fight through that, to rebuild the company from that, to hold on to those global accounts, which could have walked away overnight, but we managed to hold them for a period of, I think, 18 to 24 months after the sale of Rosenbluth, just because of the professionalism with which we handled them. Holding on to my staff, we had probably the best business travel team in the country at that time, very, very advanced in its capabilities, very skilled, very professional. And it was very easy to have given up on them and let them go. I managed to hold on to a lot of them. They created successful careers back with Lionel India. And I think the third and most important challenge which I had was to create the global consortium of global experts in travel. It was something I had not done. I may have worked in the international space, but it's a different thing to try and create a new organization, interview global partners, interview technology companies, interview and build relationships with partners across the world, whether it's Latin America, Europe, North America, or Asia. And I think those friendships and those collaborations that I developed in that time, which was, I think, 2002 to about 2007, are today still people that I work with in different roles and different responsibilities. I think the second greatly challenging role was the agencia role, because I was introducing a new business model to the industry in India, which the industry in India had not heard. Corporate customers did not understand what was meant by a technology-led business travel operation, did not understand self-booking technology. And I can look back with pride to say that what I started in 2009 is today the industry default. It is the way the industry works today. Self-booking technology is used in the retail space. When you look at Yatra, Make My Trip, and so on and so forth, these are all examples of self-booking in the retail space. It is also the way corporations work today. So if you look at all the large corporations, the Fortune 1000 companies, the Fortune India 1000 companies, almost all of them use self-booking technology today in the way in which they deliver services to their employees. More importantly, I changed the way the industry delivered services to its customers. So a lot of companies today follow the model that I created in 2009, 2010, which was the outsourced customer service center. So we worked with an external agency. We trained the staff. We educated them on how to deliver a quality experience to an enterprise customer, which was very, very different from managing a retail customer. And the third important thing was in the agencia role that we did not operate on a credit model with our customers. Now, that's a that was a huge thing in the India market because every customer wanted a period of credit from its suppliers and would take its own. And we said, sorry, we will work on a credit card service delivery model. There were many other aspects to the business that I don't want to bore you with. And I think this, along with the fact that I got involved with GBTA as an advisory board director, I started working again I was in an international company, Agencia, so I had a lot of international interactions, but I also started volunteering and offering my time for professional education, for professional events, for networking across the GBTA world, which was North America, Western Europe, and of course, Asia. Started engaging with the advisory board in China, with our advisory board across Asia and in India, and building events and executing events for them. I think this was also, frankly, I would say, yes, definitely challenging, but also very enriching and very fulfilling when I look back on that period.
So, Mr. Sundaram, building on that, our viewers would like to know, you have been honored with several awards and accolades. So which one do you regard as your greatest achievement and why?
I think the award of the President's Club in 2013 with Agencia was probably the most fulfilling, though I've received awards prior to that. But that, in a lot of ways, proved a couple of things that I had set out to do when I started working with Agencia. So Agencia, being part of Expedia and headquartered out of North America, the basic organizational perspective is we know everything, we've got it set, we have the technology, we have the solutions, we will basically take the US model and replicate it in Europe and every other part of the world. And the initial few years was to basically give them a reality check and say, hey guys, this is not the way the world works. You're looking at this as a US-centric operation and saying, this works in the US, so this will work in all over the world. And this is not how it happens. Though I may have won the President's Club Award for a certain acquisition that I helped in, I think the previous 4 years, I helped Agencia become a more global organization in terms of listening to the needs of global customers, understanding how global customers worked, because I had done this for almost 15, 20 years in my prior company roles. This award was special to me because I acquired a company for Agencia single-handedly, sitting out of India, which was implemented in probably 40 countries across the world, which was $40-50 million. I don't remember how big the size was. And it was the first global customer acquired outside of North America and Western Europe. So no other region had acquired customers. And it was every year, one would see these people being awarded, and they would always be my colleagues from North America and Western Europe. It felt as though everyone else was not really doing what they were supposed to do. And I think I was the first awardee from outside North America and Western Europe. And to that extent, I think I look back on that award with a great deal of pride.
So, Mr. Sundaram, my next one is a pretty straight one. You have handled several sustainability projects, right? So when and how did you develop an interest in ESG?
My journey with ESG actually started in 2020, 2021, where as part of ProKonsul, I was hired by one of the big 4 consulting firms to be a part of their global procurement organization as a subject matter expert and a consultant to them. So I was consulting, I would not want to name which organization, but it was certainly one of the big 4 organizations. And even today, I am technically still a part of their global procurement organization. I was hired as a subject matter expert to re-engineer and optimize their $900 million business travel program, which is spread across 129 countries. During this period, I re-engineered their procurement strategy. I re-engineered their business travel strategy, their global travel program management, their strategic sourcing, and so on and so forth. And I also got introduced to their net zero goals. Now, as with most Fortune 100 or Fortune 500 companies, these companies also had net zero goals, which was then an introduction to the science-based targets, which is the SBTI, and so on and so forth. And I got more and more intrigued by what they were trying to do, how they were trying to do, what they were trying to do in our domain, which is one of the most polluting segments of the business. So if you understand sustainability, there's scope 1, there's scope 2, and scope 3 emissions. Business travel generates scope 3 emissions, which is what comes out of cars, which comes out of hotels, which comes out of aviation. And scope 3 emissions, particularly for non-manufacturing organizations like consulting firms, BPOs, etc., is a major contributor to their emissions. And globally now, when these organizations are bidding for business, they have to prove their sustainability credentials. And that was my initial introduction. I started reading up a lot as part of my consulting engagement. Also, I was exposed to a lot of internal content that the client generated. I started engaging a lot more. I started incorporating this in my project in terms of the consulting side. And then I spent about 3 or 4 months finding the right organization where I could get myself certified. I was keen that I did not want to be someone who could just talk without having some basis on the basis of which I would lend my advice. So that's how I identified the Global Sustainable Tourism Council. Being a UN body, it has great credibility. It works with, I think, 40 odd national governments across the world. And it's got tremendous credibility. And that's how I signed up for the program. It wasn't a straightforward program. There was, of course, classes. There was a lot of content. But most importantly, to get the certification, one had to build a project paper, which was then approved by the GSTC Secretariat, that it validated the principles that had been taught. So that was, of course, a pressure point, as it was with independent directors in sitting for this exam and clearing it. So I think that's been my journey. And subsequent to that, I today run a global series on sustainability called Global Voices in Sustainable Travel and Meetings, where I invite industry experts from across the world, and we talk about issues relevant to sustainability as it applies to scope 3 emissions. And it's been going on now for about 6 months. So that's what I do. I also do consulting projects, which are, of course, of different complexities. So that was how my journey on ESG started.
Amazing. So, Mr. Sundaram, as an ESG and corporate governance expert, what values do you bring to the table?
I think the biggest value I bring to the table is that while I may have credentials in ESG and corporate governance, that is tempered with a fairly long stint and a fairly long career in different diverse organizations and very complex competitive businesses, which has meant real in-depth experience and hands-on tackling of business issues. What I bring to the table is that I'm not a theoretician. I have done what I'm talking about in a practical, real-life environment. I have worked in organizations where I've delivered from an executive standpoint, and therefore I understand the pain, the challenges, and the opportunities that executives have. And hopefully, as an expert in corporate governance and ESG, I will be able to understand the challenges and also direct their efforts to the most optimal results. I've had a wide degree of international exposure. I have had experience across different, diverse, sometimes very difficult situations that I've had to contend with. And I think that's my core value as an independent director to any organization, that I have worked in, I have got my hands dirty in very complex, difficult global situations. I worked my way through situations. Many of the organizations that I worked with, whether it was the Thomas Cook example or the Lionel example or the agency example, or even the ProKonsul example, were essentially in a lot of ways startups. They were new concepts, new ideas, new business models, new technologies, new approaches to doing things, which I successfully took to market. So I do have a great deal of understanding of how to take a product to market, how to devise a go-to-market strategy, how to leverage marketing, PR, media, and build a successful organization with limited investment. And I think that's probably one of the core competences I bring, which is this manufacturing concept of frugal engineering. You've got to be frugal even in managing businesses. You can't be overly generous with your costs and pay out monies left, right, and center. You've got to learn to work with limited resources. You've got to get the best out of your resources, and you've got to do the best job that you can possibly do to succeed. And I think that's what I bring to the table as an ESG and corporate governance expert.
Rightly said, Mr. Sundaram. So as someone working closely with technology, what are some of the most remarkable changes you have seen in your field with changes in technology? And what changes do you expect to see with the advent of technology like IoT, AI, ML, blockchain, big data, etc.?
I think, 33 years is a fairly long career. When we started, I can tell you honestly, I had never touched a computer keyboard till it was installed in Thomas Cook in 1991 or 92 for the first time. I think I must have learned how to operate a laptop because I had to do it somehow. I had to write a letter and that thing, and I had to figure out how to do it, and that's how I did it. I think if I look back, life has become a lot simpler. Technology has enabled a lot of capabilities. It has made life simpler. It has made us more time efficient. It has improved the efficiency of the resources we deploy to do what we do. It has created a great deal of efficiency, but it has also built and created a huge amount of complexity, whether it be across privacy law, whether it be across misuse, abuse, and we can see all of that all around us all the time. I think a lot of the things that you mentioned, like blockchain, machine learning, AI, IoT, big data, Web 3.0 are fantastic capabilities. I think what we as leaders need to do is to avoid getting caught up in the jargon and start really looking at how these things will materially impact us on a day-to-day basis, how it will impact our organizations, how we can make these technologies do what we want it to do to achieve the maximum gain that we expect for our companies. I think a lot of us today, and very honestly, are too caught up in the jargon and falling in love with technology just for technology's sake. I am not one of those subscribers. I want the technology to work for me. I want it to be efficient. I want it to recognize the challenges, the opportunities, and the results that I want it to deliver. And with that in mind, I think what we really need to do is to continue to strive to keep things simple. Use technology to make life simpler, to make life more efficient, and avoid digressing into needless experimentation and irrelevant activities which may generate a lot of noise and maybe, to use a sustainability word, greenwashing. You're familiar with the term greenwashing. I think there's a lot of tech washing as well, which goes on where people just talk about ChatGPT and this, that, and the others. But the use case of how it will actually make a material difference to your life and my life, that gets hidden because of all the hype. I think what I would want to focus on as we look at these technologies and these opportunities is, what can it do for us? How can it do it? What will it cost us? And how will things improve? And how will we become more efficient from a resourcing standpoint? That's the critical, crucial question. Life and business today are more and more interconnected. And therefore, we need to be sure that when we deploy these technologies, because everything becomes highly interconnected, it is also possible that everything can fail simultaneously. We've had these instances in the past where, for example, even COVID-19 was an example of the interconnected world and what happened. So we've got to embrace the interconnectivity, but with our eyes open. We've got to recognize the challenges that interconnectivity may bring. We've got to recognize the fact that technology can be abused. As you can see with ChatGPT as well, you saw this article a couple of days back where a lawyer built his entire business case in the US on a ChatGPT response, which turned out to be fictitious. So we've got to absorb technology, certainly, We can't ignore it. We have to adopt it. We have got to accept it, but we've got to do it with our eyes and ears open and not be blindsided just by saying, oh, this technology is going to change the world. And so we just fall in love with it. I think we need to be realistic about how we go about things.
Rightly said, rightly said. We are building a community of industry magnates. The move is meant for cross-pollination of knowledge and building a knowledge-sharing community of corporate giants and industry experts. So what are your thoughts about these initiatives taken by Mr. Zishan Pathan, Mr. Heval Mehta, and the whole team of WDC?
I think it's a very creditable and very important initiative. Diverse experience, complex competitive business experience, managing with limited resources, building teams in different environments, in different time spaces, is a skill that can be leveraged to a great deal by modern boards. And I think that's really what is important. When I see organizations today, and I work with various organizations, whether in India and particularly overseas, what I do find particularly with international organizations is they tend to have a very homogeneous board. The board normally has people with common nationalities, common orientation, and they are hesitant to they're hesitant to implement DEI actually in their board construct. And I think that's something which is self-defeating in the long run. You've got to have exposure of different people, different geographies, different cultures, different orientation, different experiences to really build successful global organizations. I think the diversity and the depth of experience and the ability to work with limited resources, I think those are some of the key things that future board members will be valued for. Because today, of course, the venture capital space is fairly bullish. People do get a lot of money for concepts and ideas. But I think the truly successful ventures are the ones which are very conscientious about how they manage their monies, how they spend their monies, what they spend their monies on, and how they leverage all the available resources that they have. And I think this is where the WDC and Zishan and Heval's contribution would be valued. And I'm also looking towards the future with a great deal of positive sentiment, given my experience with them in the last several months.
Mr. Sundaram, your expertise and passion for this subject matter were evident throughout the interview, and it was inspiring to witness your dedication to excellence, really. It was fantastic conversing with you, and I'm confident that your insights will inspire the future leaders. Thank you so much, Mr. Sundaram, for joining us today. Wish you the best for your future endeavors. Moreover, trust that this initiative by Directors Institute has unquestionably expanded the participants' understanding and enriched their minds.
Absolutely. Thank you, Sunny, for having me on this interview.
Thank you so much. Have a nice day.
Bye-bye.